started. Om. 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 Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu Mavid Vishavahaihi. Om Shanti Shanti Shantihi. Om Parthaya Pratibodhitam Bhagavatam Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Kratitam Purana Muninam Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitam Dritavarshinim Bhagavatim Ashtadashadhyayinim Ambatvam Anusantatami Bhagavath Gita Bhavatveshini Namostu te Vyasa Vishada Buddhe Kulla Ravindayata Patra Netra Yena Tvaya Bharata Taila Purnaha Prajvalito Jnanamaya Pradipaha Prapanna Parijataya Totra Vetraika Panaye Jnanamudraya Krishnaya Geetamritaduhe Namaha Mukham Karoti Vachalam. One second. Yeah. Mukham Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langayate Girim Yat Kripa Tamaham Vande Paramananda Madhavam Yam Brahma Varunendra Rudra Marutaha Stunvanti Divyaistavaihi Vedai Sangapada Kramopanishadaihi Gayanti Yam Samagaha Dhyana Vastita Tatkatena Manasa Pashyanti Yam Yoginaha Yasyantam Navidu Sura Suraganaha Devaya Tasmai Namaha Devaya Tasmai Namaha Sarvadharman Parityajya Mamekam Sharanam Braja Aham Tva Sarva Papebhyaha Mokshayishyami Ma Shuchaha. So we are in the 8th chapter. This chapter is called as Akshara Brahma Yoga, indicating that as much as in the 7th chapter, we actually studied about the world and how the whole world is nothing but Ishvara. In the 8th chapter, we are actually going inwards. So in the 7th chapter, we saw that certain terms were used in the beginning, and then in the beginning also, we learned about this, where, Arjuna wanted to know the meaning of all those terms like Adhyatma, Brahma, and then Adhyagnya, Karma. So we saw all this. Now, the reason for asking the question is, again, in the 7th chapter, we learned a lot about that the world is outside us. But in the 8th chapter, we are trying to understand that the whole world, which is nothing but Ishvara, is not just outside, but it is also inside. So we cannot really limit what we call as Ishvara or God to something that is only outside and it permeates the whole world and everything. It is not exactly that, right? So like in Ishavasya Upanishad, we have Ishavasya Idagam Sarvam. So in that also, it says God pervades all things. So when we think about this pervasive nature of God in all things, we are kind of likely to commit this mistake that all things means only things that we see through our eyes. And this seeing through our eyes can be very, very limiting, So it's kind of an error really in our concept, because we ourselves, we think, okay, we never can realize that we are also one of the things of the world. So since we are also one of the things of the world, obviously that God has to be inside also. So this adhibhuta, which was a word that was used, adhibhuta prapancha, which is really externally, which is what we think is the external world, that should not be taken as just the world in which God dwells, but God also dwells in the Adhyatma Purusha. Adhyatma Prapancha. So Prapancha meaning the whole pervasive world. So that is also nothing but that Ishvara. So this, like for example, when I see this picture of somebody sitting on the chair, I look at, somebody that, okay, somebody's outside me, but normally this thought, but we never really think normally that, no, it is also me who's sitting in the form of that lady outside. So we always look at outside, we always judge things outside. But more and more, we have to start thinking about that, that what I see outside is also within me. So in other words, whatever we see which is outside in the form of the chair, in the form of the lady, in the form of all those pictures, is actually nothing but me, which is also existing in everything else. So that's the part that 8th chapter is slowly and slowly bringing us to it. That in 7th chapter, we saw everything which was outside, and we were able to appreciate and understand that whole prapancha there is nothing but Ishvara in different forms and everything. But in this, we are also part of that Ishvara. I am also in that lady. I am in that chair. I'm in that carpet. I'm in this. Everything is nothing but me alone. So that's the part is 8 chapters. So I just wanted to give a little bit of introduction. We'll just chant shlokas 1 through 5, and then we'll move on to almost 8 to 10th. We will spend a little more because last time that's where we stopped. Arjuna uvacha kim tad brahma kim adhyatmam kim karma purushottama adhibhutam cha kim proktam adhidaivam kim uchyate adhiyajna katam kotra dehesmin madhusudana prayana kale cha katham jneyosi niyatatmabhihi. Shri Bhagavan uvacha aksharam brahma paramam svabhavodhyatma uchyate bhuta bhavodbhava karaha visarga karma sangitaha adhibhutam ksharo bhavaha purushashchadi daivatam adhiyajnyohamevatra Dehe deha pratambara. So we saw all these terms in all these 4 shlokas, but the whole idea is the key point that everything at the end of the day is nothing but Ishvara. So starting with everything which is, we said outside, which is adhibhuta. Then we talked about karma, which is the process which is part of this creation. Adhidaiva, which is the Hiranyagarbha, or the totality of the subtle minds. Adhyatma, which is that Akshara Brahma, which is outside, which we think is outside, is actually nothing but everywhere. It is Adhyatma, which is within myself also. So this is all the things that we discussed about. And then the question that Arjuna asked, after all these technical questions, probably one of the most powerful questions for us where we are, which is, then how do I really attain that Ishvara when I'm close to the point of giving up this clothing, which is this body? How can I really attain this one? So that's kind of a definite action that Arjuna is asking Krishna, what is that action I have to do? So then Krishna says, well, the only thing you have to do is just remember Ishvara. Just remember Ishvara all the time. So, sounds pretty straightforward here. I mean, from this narrative that I gave just now, if everything else is Ishvara outside, and if I'm also Ishvara, then it's no brainer, I will only think about Ishvara, right? Quite straightforward. But we know it is not the case. We know that even as we are nearing, I mean, if I say nearing towards the end of my life sounds very, depressing, but, we have to be mindful of the fact that we have no idea when our time of leaving, of giving up this body is going to come, just like we never knew when we were going to be born, right? That was not in our hands. And these two things are probably the things which is not in our hands. So I need to start thinking about that Ishvara. And that is why Bhagavad Gita, is giving us all that technical information as well as logical information about really this ultimate goal in my life. So this example that I have, which I've shown here with the mother, once again, where is my mother's picture here? Oh, this thing is hiding here. So ultimately, the idea is where the only way, just like a mother, thinks about when she has a baby, her mind is totally tuned to the baby, right? In every possible way. Can we use that same kind of an example to our minds, that slowly and slowly, when I am looking at something else, I think that is nothing but Ishvara in the form of my phone, Ishvara in the form of the person, Ishvara in the form of this, everything I just substitute with Ishvara. Once I do that, that by itself becomes a kind of a meditation, So that meditation is the only way that I can start to slowly dissolve all these aspects, Adhyatma, Adideva, Adibhuta, Karma, Adideva, all these things I dissolve into this one aspect that ultimately it is nothing but Ishvara. When I do that, then I will only focus when I'm doing something which is consistent with what the skills I have and what my role is in the society. So I will focus only on improving my skills, improving on my duty itself. And when I do that, but keeping in mind the bhava that ultimately everything is Ishvara. It's like this example of, in a concert where we have, not just a concert, even an orchestra, right? How is it that we are able to find that peace when I go to a concert? When I go to the most beautiful concert, I come out and say, oh my God, that was just so beautiful. The only way that happens is when I recognize that every aspect in that orchestra, that may be a 50% orchestra with all the instruments, but they all are in sync. They are all in harmony. They're all in harmony with a particular pitch, or in Tamil, in the Indian language, you would say Shruti, right? At the end of the day, even when somebody is, in a concert and there's silence, there is a Shruti which goes on, right? So that Shruti is like this Ishvara, So when I have the Shruti in my background, then automatically, and I just perform to the best I can, consistent with my skills, consistent with really what my role is, then that itself is a great meditation. So that is where we talked about. Any questions before we go into this next set of shlokas? So then we have going to give up these clothes, you will definitely think of Ishvara, right? So so the whole chapter is now we look at how Ishvara is, becomes the main part of my life. So at the end of the day, we may have so many goals as part of my, vyavaharik life, but ultimately all those goals have to dissolve into only this one goal. And that one goal is that Ishvara. So that is the ultimate thing. And this is what Krishna is also telling Arjuna, that the last question, if you prayana kale chakatham jneyusi niyatatmi bihi, that's Arjuna's question. He says the only thing is with this. But then we may ask this question, how do I know when I will pass away? Should I think that, I will pass away just now and I just bring everything? I know that I have to focus on Ishvara. So I will, just before I pass away, I'll just think about Narayana, So, like the story of this one person who names all his sons Narayana, and thinking that when he's going to pass away, he'll just chant Narayana, his son's name, and he'll automatically get moksha, But then at the end of his birth, immediately he thinks about maybe the money that he's leaving behind and not really the name of Narayana, right? So that's the danger that we might get into. And because I never know when I'm going to pass away. But if I have to bring myself to think about Narayana all the time, what and how should I live my life? That is, it almost has to be an habit. I cannot expect that, at the last moment, I will concentrate the thing. With whom I am attached.
Frozen, I think, Sunita. She will join again, I think.
I lost connection.
Yeah. Right.
I just connected back using my hotspot.
Right. Okay.
But interestingly, we're still live though.
Yeah, that connection is still there.
Correct. Yeah. So we were right here where we said that, at the end of the day, there could be many factors that can prevent me from thinking, of Ishvara. It could be also not just my family and everyone, but it could also be my own physical body. If my body is in pain, that is also going to prevent me from thinking about it, right? So I just never know towards the end of my life how in what shape and form I'm going to be. So I cannot afford to postpone this concentration on Ishvara until the time of my death. Maybe I may even lose my power of speaking. Maybe be, at that last minute of time, there may be something outside that can happen. Like we say, there are three ways: Adi Daiva, Adi Bhuta, and Adhyatma. Three ways in which disturbances can come to me. So all these things can happen for which I have absolutely no control on thinking about that Ishvara. So I have to take this goal very seriously, and I have to start that practice now itself, so that I can actually think about, or that thought of Ishvara will be totally part of myself. So any discussion on this point, on how easy or difficult this can be? What do you think? So that is what, he says, Antakale cha mameva smaran muktva kalevaram yap prayati samadbhavam yati nastyatra samshayaha. So Krishna is just giving the final prescription. He doesn't spend time on the fact that we will have all these issues and all that. He's just saying, you just have to do this. And it's up to us to analyze the shloka for ourselves and see, where do I fit in this whole thing, So, Antakale cha mameva smaran kalevaram ya prayati. So whoever departs, he says, whoever departs while thinking of me in my essential nature, there is no possibility of return. Now, again, somebody may say, what, in my whole life, in this particular life, I didn't really get to enjoy everything. I really, really wanted to maybe go to Japan or something like that. That didn't happen. I went to Hawaii, I went to all these places, but Japan, no, I did not go. So, can I just take birth just to go to Japan? Now, again, that is not in our hands, mainly because we don't know the kind of vasanas which is there within us. So idea being that I have to resolve these things in my mind in this birth itself, and understand that what the ultimate goal is. And of course, I cannot do it mainly because the scriptures alone tell me that it is. I have to start analyzing it and understanding it for myself, why this goal is the most important one. So then in shloka number 6, this is exactly what I just said, because he says that, ultimately, whatever is in our interest, whatever is in it that I have resolved within myself, that is exactly where I will end up finally. So I have to be very careful on what my last thought is. But that last thought is driven by the fact that everything I have taken up to my life up to that point, that is what my last thought will be. So that last thought, whatever I've been entertaining in my mind, that much I should be careful, how much of, jealousy I had towards somebody, or how much of greed I had, how much of anger, how much of desire for more wealth, more houses, more people in my life. All these things I have to be very careful, because ultimately that is the thought which will drive it. And one very easy way to think about this of Ishvara at the end of the day is I have just a simple example here. It depends really upon the pattern of my thinking in all my life. Our pattern of thinking today has been where I have been separating things in the world, In the world, I always look at this person as somebody and that person as somebody, and I basically distinguish them by their qualities, or whatever they are, by their strengths and weaknesses, my likes and dislikes, which I superimpose on the others. So all these things is how I look at it. So just like I have this example here of in the ocean, for example, the water takes on different forms and shapes in the form of bubbles, froth, foam, lather, etc. But at the end of the day, it is nothing but water, right? So too, can I look at this entire world as not those individual pieces, but as Ishvara in those forms? So it's just the mindset that I'm changing myself. Am I looking at the whole world as things, and oh, by the way, they are Ishvara? Or am I looking at everything as Ishvara in the form of this, Ishvara in the form of bubble, Ishvara in the form of the ladder, etc. So I have to change my mindset within myself to start looking at the world in this most universal way of life. So that is why that Yam Yam Bhavam is such an important aspect here. So then in the next shloka, seventh one, we saw that he takes up this aspect on how to remember that Ishvara and perform our duties. But he starts off first with saying, whatever duty I have, and since in this particular shloka, he's talking to Arjuna, he uses the word fight, because Arjuna is a fighter, he's a warrior. And the shloka, again, as I said last time, is something which is most misunderstood, where people have said that, oh, Bhagavad Gita teaches me how to fight. Bhagavad Gita tells me that I have to fight. That is not true. It all depends upon really whatever my duty is. So he says, Tatsmat, therefore, Sarveshu Kaleshu, at all times, Mam Anusmara. Just remember me in whatever duty you're doing. In this case, he says, Yudhya, Mai Arpita Mano Buddhihi. Just completely focus your mind into me, and then you will most definitely come to me. So very powerful, very beautiful, very simple sadhana for all of us here. And what is that sadhana? Basically, the sadhana is really in and through everything I do, I just keep the goal of Ishvara. And that is why that example that I gave of water in the bubbles, when I'm in front of the ocean, when I'm standing in the beach, I can just admire that beach for, how the waves are coming up and everything. But in and through those waves, if I can just say it is just Ishvara, just like I would say it is nothing but water, here I have to think about that ultimately, that it is nothing but Ishvara. So any questions or anything about so far? So far, so good. Okay. So then now we come to some very beautiful key shlokas, here, where he describes that Ishvara. And how does he describe that? First, he talks about this aspect of three things that is required here. So he says, Abhyasa yoga yuktena chetasa na anya gamina paramam purusham divyam yati partha anuchintayan. So he says three things. One is the only way one can think about that Ishvara in our own lives, even as I am doing my duty. First of all is, he talks about in the previous one, with the mind and alert, mind and intellect completely in full alertness, So I may be doing, say, my work, I'm talking to somebody. Even as I'm talking to somebody, I need to pay complete attention to what I'm speaking, right? So it is developing that practice of alertness and developing the practice of focusing and concentration. So Abhyasa Yoga, which is constant practice of that alertness by the Chetasa, so Chetasa, Cheta meaning the mind, where the mind is 100% focused and it is not wandering. So na anya gamina, it is not wavering at all, and it is completely focused on what, with the mind not moving towards anything but the supreme resplendent Purusha. So here he gives the words beautifully, the word Purusha, the word Divyam, all indicating that Ishvara. Once when we do that, then there is just no doubt that one can really reach that ultimate state of the Purusha. So Anuchintayan. So Anuchintayan, basically, Anu means repetition. So constantly I have to keep on remembering Ishvara in and through everything. It's not as if, I do something and then, okay, I just keep repeating the word of Narayana or Ishvara or anything. But in and through everything, I have to start thinking about Ishvara through that aspect. So it's almost like a 24-hour meditation. If I do this, I don't necessarily have to sit for 30 minutes and then come back and do the normal things. So you see, the word meditation itself is now taking a totally different route, a totally different meaning here. So basically the idea is that one has to develop a thought habit where the thought basically is, I am just focusing 100% on what I'm doing. So just that alone, you can see how in today's world, it is so difficult, right? Especially with this phone that we have, even for a few minutes, we automatically think, oh, you know what? Anyway, the lecture is for 1 hour. I can just focus on something else. Let me take care of this one quick text or this one quick, this ping that comes through. Let me just check that out. Our mind is so habituated towards doing that. But this, probably the shlokas, I think I need to, next time when I talk to some youth, I should bring this as how in Bhagavath Gita, it talks about how to manage your distractions, So just focusing, because it has all the words that it says here. Don't take your mind away to anything else. Focus your attention only on what you're doing. And then, of course, he gives us also where to focus on and how to focus. Everything is there in this one shloka here. So then now we are going to discuss these two shlokas 9 and 10. But the way we're going to do it is that first we will actually take the shloka 10 and then we'll come to 9 here. Because in shloka number 9, there is a lot of very good descriptions which will also allow our mind to focus on that Divya Purusha. Who is the Divya Purusha? What are the qualities of the Divya Purusha? It's like we talked about before, our mind tends to go only where there is a form, there is a word that describes it. Otherwise, it's impossible for us to think of anything. Again, going back to the same example of this ocean and the water, I can think about bubbles, I can think about all this, but it's hard for me to focus on just the water when I'm in front of an ocean. So too, here, Krishna is giving such beautiful words to explain that Divya Purusha, which we will come to, which is the shloka here. But let's first address the shloka number 10 here. So in shloka number 10, he basically talks about this constant practice of this meditation. And that meditation is just really focusing upon what I'm doing, completely that concentration. When I do that, then I can definitely reach there. And what is he saying here? He says, Prayana kale manasa achalena. So at the time of death, Prayana kale manasa achalena, with a mind that is completely unshaken. Okay? Bhaktya yukto yoga balenacha. So completely with, first, of course, he has talked about Shraddha. Now he talks about how that devotion element has to come into me. So bhaktya, through bhakti, let me yoke myself. Let me just completely attach myself by the power of yoga alone, by this power of constant practice, that yoga bala. Bruvor madhye pranam aveshya samyak. So in the middle of the two brows, having placed the whole prana. So we will discuss this also, which is basically, essentially what he's trying to say is, that doesn't mean that, I just close my eyes and I focus my attention there. But the whole idea is here, the word prana indicates all the five powers of prana. All this prana, apana, vyana, samana, udana, all the powers of digestion, all the powers of thinking, all the powers, everything essentially stops indicating not that it stops by itself, but it is something where the focus of myself is taken away from these pranas, and the mind and intellect is just focused on that absolute self, which I'm saying is in between the two, bhruvod madhye, between the two eyebrows. So it's fixed on that supreme reality, which is that, and such a person goes to that resplendent Purusha. So basically, all this can happen only, of course, when somebody has been practicing this all the time. So that is, one develops that strength, that yoga balam, that balam is obtained only when this practice happens all the time. So that is what he's trying to say here. Now let's go back to shloka number 10 here and really see what each one of these words are really trying to tell us. So it is basically, of course, in shloka 9, he gives you that Jnani's sadhana here, which is Kavim Puranam Anushasitaram Anoraniyam Samanusmaret Yaha. That person who actually remembers throughout Sarvasya Dhataram. So again, beautiful adjectives, all for describing that Purusha. Sarvasya Dhataram, Achintya Rupam, Aditya Varnam. So you see how many beautiful words that he gives, so that our focus of Ishvara remains on this description of Ishvara. And then Tamasaha Parastat, somebody who is beyond the darkness of ignorance. And here, of course, what is he talking about? Ignorance? What do you think? Any idea on what does he mean by the ignorance? We'll, of course, come to describing each one of these words. That's why I wanted to spend a little time today just going through each one of the words of that Supreme Purusha or the Paramatma. So let's take the word Kavi itself. So what does the word Kavi come to your mind when we think about this word Kavi?
The writer or the
poet.
Poet.
Exactly.
Poet.
A poet, exactly. But here the word Kavi, is referring to, like, the Krantadarshi, that's such a person who in this, like, who's omniscient, who's all-knowing. So that is the meaning of Kavi here. So Kavi is that person who knows everything, nothing can be hidden from this person. So he's actually beyond our own aspect of, time and space. So, which means that he knows everything which was the past, present, and future. So that is the word Kavi. So Kavi means omniscient, all-knowing, somebody who's beyond the concept of time and space. And that is the reference for here, which is, Kavi. So we've come across some other words in the past too, in the second chapter, Vedaham Samatitani, Vartamani, Cha Arjuna, Bhavishyani, Cha Bhutani, So that is what this word Kavi actually means. So we can connect it to that second chapter. So if I meditate upon even just this word Kavi, somebody who is beyond time, somebody who's this one, you can see how the mind just totally stills, because you cannot think of anything which is beyond time and space. Now, suppose I say, let me meditate upon a flower. When I meditate on a flower, automatically, the thought will come, okay, is this a malipu or is it a rose? Is it pink in color? Is it white in color? Does it have a beautiful, aroma? All that. But the word Kavi here, which is beyond time, beyond space, which is omniscient, which is all-knowing, automatically my mind just stills. So that is why this word has been chosen here beautifully to describe that Supreme Paramatma. The next word, which is Puranam. So what does the word Puranam, what what does it ring? What does it, what kind of meaning does it come to you?
Old.
Old? Yeah, exactly. Old or ancient, right? So here, actually, he's saying Puranam means, Puranam, actually, maybe I should have put another A here, Puranam, which means it is timeless. It is timeless. So Shankaracharya ji in his Bhashya, he says, Pura eva navaha api, Pura api navaha, which means that it may seem ancient, but it is always new. It is, so generally when we say old or new, we just refer to it with respect to time, right? But then, as I said, the word kavi, which means beyond time. So here, basically, Purana means that which is, again, it may seem ancient, but it is always new. And in some of us who have done Drik Drish Vivek, in that, the shloka number 5, no deti nastameti sha swayam prakasha, which is neither born, which is neither dies. It is always self-illumining. It is that Chaitanya Purana, which is always fresh, always, it is beyond the concept of time. It is always new. And that is what this word Purana means. Okay. The next word, Anushasitaram. Anushasitaram, which means that one who controls everything, one who has a final authority over everything. That is an Anushasitaram. So this Paramatma is, or Ishvara is ultimately the one who is the controller of everything. And today, we give so much of importance to our own bosses. We want to please the boss. We want to make sure that, we don't upset the boss because we think our boss is the controller of my destiny. But here we have that Paramatma who is an even bigger controller, who is a much bigger authority over everything. The next one, which is Sarvasya Dhataram. Sarvasya Dhataram. Dhataram means one who ordains everything. I guess in some ways it's very similar to the other word, but it's also here where he is not just a controller, but he is the person, he or she, or it, however we want to look at this Ishvara, is the one which basically distributes everything according to one's actions. So we can say that Ishvara is really the set of all the laws put together. Ishvara is that dharma principle, which keeps everything together. So Ishvara is that also the substratum. Just like I gave this, again, I'm bringing this ocean and wave. I think I'm talking about ocean and wave and bubbles quite a bit in this lecture here. But really, because we're talking about that absolute Paramatma Brahman, the closest example we can think about is actually this ocean and the waves, where in this ocean, that ultimate substratum is nothing but that water which comes in the form of the waves and everything. So too, the ultimate substratum in this whole world at the end of the day is nothing but that Ishvara which is in the form of everything, that Ishvara which maintains that order which is there, that Ishvara which individually each one of us, whatever kind of good or not so good things we do, the result of which we get is really the composite effect of this particular Ishvara. So Sarvasya Dhataram. The next one, which is Anoraniyam. Anoraniyam, which is, in chemistry, the smallest particle that we can think of is, the atoms, atoms. Of course, you have all the other things like the quarks and all this. So it's smaller or subtler than the smallest thing that I can think of. That is, something that, I can keep breaking apart to a point where I cannot even see it. And he's saying that, at the end of the day, this principle, this consciousness principle, is so small that whatever you do, you cannot see by the most powerful of all the microscopes that can be invented. Okay, so it is that sukshma. It is so sukshma that even the mind cannot even comprehend that part of it. So to that extent is, it can be that small or big as we may think about it. And then it is achintya rupam. Achintya rupam meaning that I cannot give any kind of rupam to it. I can use all these rupams, all these definitions for my own meditation, but at the end of the day, give any kind of form, I can tell you it is without any form. So it's almost like Samartha Ramdas, who was the teacher for Shivaji, Chhatrapati Shivaji. He used to say, if you want to know how to meditate upon this Paramatma, so you have to meditate upon this without becoming a thinker. So think of that which is totally unthinkable. That is meditation. So without being a thinker, I think of that which cannot be thought of. So that is achintya rupam. So that, in fact, in Ishavasya Upanishad, there is this beautiful thing which says, where yato vacho nivartante. That is, the words, they go and they come back, because you just cannot even describe this aspect of Paramatma. It is that powerful. So think about, how can we even think of nothing? So that is achintya rupam. So Paramatma is that achintya rupam. And then aditya varnam. So he describes that as much as I can try to comprehend that brilliance of the sun, I just cannot even do it. So it is that. So he's symbolically comparing Ishvara to that Aditya, or the sun god. So I should try to contemplate on that Ishvara throughout in such a way that, as I would contemplate on the brilliance of the sun. So just like we have one sun which illumines everything, that Paramatma is that principle because of which we are conscious of everything else. So just like the whole place, when it gets lighted, is because of that one sun, so to everything that comes into life is because of that consciousness itself. So that is Aditya Varna. And then next one, Tamasa Parastat, that which is unaffected by even darkness. So I just put this picture of the sun here, where everything is so dark, but still the sun is totally unaffected. So Tamasa Parasat, that which is unaffected by darkness. So that is the difference between, the sunlight and the Atma Jyoti. So the sunlight can actually illumine everything, except one thing it cannot illumine is darkness, right? But this Paramatma, this consciousness, which is nothing but Atma Jyoti compared to the Aditya Jyoti, that can illumine even darkness. So we know that, for example, when I go to sleep, when I'm awake, I am aware of life, right? When I'm dreaming, that too, I can be aware that because of the consciousness, I'm able to dream. But when I'm sleeping, I'm actually not conscious of anything at all. But does that mean that there is no consciousness around? No, that is not true. That consciousness is still there. That Atma Jyoti is still there. And here I want to give this beautiful example of, Swami Chinmayananda. He would say, he gives a story, somebody went and told sun god, did you know that there is this beautiful girl? Her name is Miss Darkness. So you can, why don't you try to meet this Miss Darkness and tried to marry her. So the sun started running, it seems. The sun started running after this Miss Darkness and just could not chase. He kept on chasing, but he could never catch her because, and maybe that is why to this day, the sun is going round and around, and that is why the sun is still really a bachelor, because he can just not, catch that darkness itself. So, but then, like I said, the Atma Jyoti is something that is there even when there is darkness also. So, but it is beyond even tamasaha, tamasa indicating that darkness of ignorance. Ignorance is again a word that we use in our spiritual literature to indicate this aspect of this I-ness about me. Every time when I say I refer to this I as this one with the physical body and everything. But that absolute I is formless, is without any attributes. It's beyond the body, mind, and intellect. But I, in my ignorance, always call myself this I, which is with body. That is the ignorance that he's saying. And so this Atma is even beyond that ignorance. So tamasaha parastat, parastat, which is even beyond that. So that is the thing. So any questions, any thoughts here? So Kaving Puranam Anushasitaram Anoraniyam Anusmaredya Sarvasya Dhataram Achintya Rupam Aditya Varnam Tamasaf Parastat. Such a beautiful, again, another shloka for meditation, right? Where so many different meanings is given. Again, Kaving meaning that which is, timeless, Puranam, which is always fresh, Anushasitaram, Anoraniyam, small. Then I have to always remember Sarvasya Dhataram, again, someone who ordains everything, Achintya Rupam, which is smaller than the smallest, subtlest, the absolute subtlest, which again, in the Western, in the way we study, if we look at it just from a purely materialistic point of view, we would say, what is there? Only what my eyes can see, I can believe it. But this is even beyond the aspect of eyes. Aditya Varnam, which is indicating the a form of, it's the brilliance, comparing to the brilliance of the sun, and Tamasaf Parasat, which is beyond darkness. Any questions, any thoughts here? Yeah, I forgot to say Anushasitaram, which is one who controls everything, who has a final authority over everything. So that is almost the shlokas 8 to 10. And then we saw the shloka number 10. So where Prayana Kale Manasachalena Bhaktya Yukto Yoga Balena Chaivam. So when I have this concept of Paramatma, and through constant practice, I develop that balam, that strength. And with that strength, when I focus my complete attention, Bruvor Madhye, Prana Aveshya Samyak, where I have, where there is complete cessation in some sense on the pranas, Satam Param Purusham Upaiti Divyam. So I can, fixing this one, he goes to that resplendent Purusha. So next week, we'll take the shloka or shloka number 11, where, he talks about the meditation upon the name of Ishvara. So we'll talk a little bit about also the two kinds of moksha, the Krama Mukti and the, the Krama Mukti, which happens by focusing on Ishvara, and the moksha, which is obtained on going to that Nirguna state. Sarve bhavantu sukinaha, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kasyat dukkha bhag bhaved. Om shanti shanti shantihi. Om purnamadav purnamidam purnat purnamudachyate. Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Hari Om, everyone. Any questions?
Thank you. Hari Om.